My name is Giselle Beaumont, 28 years old. For 3 years, my husband, Devon, and his arrogant mother, Eleanor, treated me like a worthless country girl with no social standing. They forced me to do all the heavy household chores, excluded me from family dinners, and laughed at my simple clothes while his sister, Scarlett, went on endless luxury shopping sprees. At a family gathering, Devon publicly introduced his wealthy new girlfriend and handed me a divorce decree, stating, "You are just a boring tax clerk, Giselle. You have no class, and you don't fit our family's prestigious lifestyle." Eleanor threw my old canvas bag into the front yard and told me to get lost. I didn't argue. I signed the papers and walked out into the rain. They celebrated their new wealthy alliance, thinking they had upgraded, but they made a fatal mistake. The Radcliffe family's entire noble lifestyle was a hollow shell built on massive, outstanding bank debts. For years, every single credit card they swiped, their luxury car leases, and their high-limit black cards were personally guaranteed and paid off by me using my private financial trust. The second the divorce was finalized, I withdrew all my financial guarantees. Within 48 hours, their cards were declined at a high-end restaurant, their luxury cars were towed away, and Devon was left facing total credit bankruptcy before his new wedding could even begin. The dining room of the Radcliffe estate in the affluent hills of North Carolina was a carefully staged theater of old money pretension. High-backed velvet chairs flanked a long mahogany table laid with antique sterling silver, crystal wine goblets, and elaborate floral arrangements. The walls were adorned with oil portraits of ancestral figures, whose accomplishments had long been forgotten, but whose names were still invoked to maintain the family's fragile social standing. Giselle Beaumont sat near the foot of the table, quiet and unassuming. At 28, she wore a simple, tailored navy dress with no flashy jewelry, her dark hair swept back in a neat, professional low bun. For 3 years, Giselle had lived a double life. During the day, she was a high-level senior risk analyst for one of the state's largest private banking syndicates, managing multi-million-dollar credit portfolios with clinical precision. At night, she came home to this house, where she was treated as nothing more than a plain, middle-class clerk who should be grateful for the roof over her head. While Giselle silently managed the household's mounting administrative stress, her husband, Devon Radcliffe, and his mother, Lady Eleanor, spent their days chasing the mirage of high society. They hosted lavish dinners they couldn't afford, leased European sports cars, and bought designer clothes on installment plans, all to keep up appearances before their wealthy peers. To Devon's 31st birthday, Lady Eleanor announced, raising her crystal flute of vintage champagne, her fingers dripping with heavy, oversized diamond rings, and to the enduring, prestigious heritage of the Radcliffe name. "Here, here," echoed Scarlett Radcliffe, Devon's younger sister, who was currently draped in a brand-new Italian silk scarf, her eyes glued to her phone as she posted live updates of the dinner to her social media followers. Giselle raised her glass quietly, but before she could take a sip, Eleanor's sharp, critical gaze landed on her. "Really, Giselle?" Eleanor sighed, her voice a condescending drawl that carried clearly across the quiet dining room. "Must you always wear such drab, uninspiring clothing to family gatherings? Look at Devon, look at Scarlett. They possess the inherent poise of our lineage. You look like you've just stepped out of a dreary municipal tax office. It's an embarrassment to anyone who looks at our family photos." "She's right, Giselle," Devon chimed in, adjusting the heavy gold watch on his wrist, a watch he had purchased on credit just 3 months prior. He didn't look at his wife with warmth or respect. "You have no sense of style, no class, and you completely lack the aristocratic presence required to stand beside me as my career advances." Giselle slowly set her glass back down on the linen tablecloth. She didn't argue. She had spent 3 years absorbing their casual cruelty, believing that her love for Devon and her quiet support of his family would eventually be recognized. Instead of an apology, Devon reached into his breast pocket and drew out a thick, white vellum envelope, sliding it across the polished mahogany table until it rested directly against Giselle's plate. "What is this, Devon?" Giselle asked, her voice steady and calm. "It's a marital dissolution waiver," Devon said smoothly, his tone cold and entirely transactional. "Let's be direct. I have met someone who actually matches the caliber of my family's standing, Genevieve Vance, whose family owns the Regional Development Syndicate. She is pregnant with my child, and her family is prepared to merge our social interests." Eleanor sneered, reaching into her Chanel handbag and tossing a worn, empty canvas tote bag onto the table. "You are just a middle-class accountant, Giselle. You don't fit our prestigious heritage. Pack your cheap things in that bag and get out of our house. My lawyers have spent the last 3 months sealing our family's core assets, so don't even dream of trying to claw your way into the Radcliffe estate." They watched her, waiting for the frantic tears, the desperate pleas, or the loud accusations. They expected her to beg for a larger cash settlement or remind Devon of the vows he had made to her. Instead, Giselle pulled a sleek black fountain pen from her dress pocket. Without reading the financial waiver or looking at the insulting terms, she turned to the final execution page and signed her name in swift, flawless cursive. "Giselle Beaumont." She capped the pen with a sharp, definitive click. "There, it is finalized, Devon." Devon blinked, a flash of genuine irritation crossing his face. Her absolute lack of resistance robbed him of the powerful, dominant victory his ego had craved. "Not going to fight this. You realize you walk away with absolutely nothing from the Radcliffe name?" "I walk away with exactly what I brought into this house, Devon," Giselle said, standing up slowly. Her posture was perfectly straight, radiating a quiet, towering composure that made Eleanor's gaudy diamonds look like cheap glass. She looked at her husband and mother-in-law, a cold, almost pitying smile touching her lips. "Enjoy your prestigious heritage. I hope the foundation of your lifestyle is as solid as your mother's lawyers claim it is." "It is," Eleanor snapped, gesturing toward the front door. "Now take your canvas bag and leave before the real guests arrive." Giselle didn't touch the canvas bag. She turned and walked out of the grand dining room, her footsteps light and unhurried. The moment she stepped into the pouring rain outside the Radcliffe estate, a sleek, unmarked black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. Giselle climbed into the quiet, leather interior, where her private asset attorney, Marcus Alastair, was already waiting with an encrypted tablet. She pulled a secure smartphone from her purse and looked out the window as the estate's wrought iron gates faded into the dark. The submissive, quiet wife persona she had maintained to keep her marriage alive was officially dead. "Marcus," Giselle said, her voice dropping into a register of cold, absolute authority. "The dissolution is signed. Devon and Eleanor have officially terminated my residency and my association with their family." Marcus let out a quiet, cynical chuckle, his fingers tapping the tablet screen to authorize a transmission to the Central Credit Registry. "They truly believe they own that luxury lifestyle, don't they? They spent 3 years focusing on the label of their clothes and the brand of their cars," Giselle replied smoothly, her eyes reflecting the cold neon glare of the city. "They completely forgot to check who actually guarantees their debts. Trigger the master credit guarantee revocation immediately. Let's see how much their prestigious heritage is worth when the banks come to collect." While Devon and Eleanor sat in the grand dining room, uncorking another bottle of expensive wine to celebrate their upcoming elite alliance with the Vance family, a silent, devastating digital sequence was initiated across the regional financial network. Inside the black luxury sedan, Marcus turned his tablet screen toward Giselle, showing a red, blinking status bar on the Federal Credit and Asset Registry mainframe. "The automated processing delay has officially hit 0, Marcus stated, his tone dry, precise, and absolute. For 3 years, the Radcliffe family's entire noble lifestyle was a hollow shell built on massive, outstanding bank debts. Because Eleanor and Devon spent more than they ever earned, they were on the brink of total foreclosure when you married Devon. They had made a catastrophic mathematical error. Because Giselle was quiet, simple, and had spent her marriage managing the daily household accounts, they had assumed she was a penniless girl who had married up. They had completely failed to realize that Giselle's father was the founder of Beaumont Wealth Management, and she was the sole trustee of a multi-million-dollar private financial trust. To protect Devon's pride, Giselle had quietly used her trust to co-sign and personally guarantee every single luxury credit card, high-limit black card, mortgage payment, and European sports car lease the Radcliffes used to sustain their fake lifestyle. The banks only allowed the Radcliffes to borrow millions because Giselle's pristine personal assets were listed as the primary collateral. The master credit guarantee has been officially revoked, and the cross-collateral bonds have been pulled, Marcus announced, clicking a final button on his laptop. The blue lines of banking data vanished, replaced by a cold, clinical string of text. Guarantee status revoked. Collateral released. Debt default acceleration initiated. Giselle leaned back in the luxurious leather seat, picking up a bottle of still water. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her gaze fixed entirely on the flashing digital lights of the financial district fading into the background. They wanted a high society heiress to match their prestigious lifestyle, Marcus, Giselle murmured, her voice radiating a brilliant, freezing detachment. Let's see how well their prestige holds up when the bank repossesses their world before breakfast. Back in the dining room of the Radcliffe estate, Devon was raising his glass to his sister, completely blind to the fact that his private banking app was about to send an automated alert that would freeze his entire world before the sun could even rise. The morning after Giselle's quiet departure, the grand terrace of the Radcliffe estate was bathed in golden North Carolina sunlight, completely masking the financial fault lines running beneath the property. Lady Eleanor had wasted no time. By 10 a.m., the estate was bustling with high-end caterers, floral designers, and a private classical duet tuning their violins near the rose garden. This was the official welcome brunch for Genevieve Vance, the wealthy development heiress whom Devon had proudly declared as his future wife. Eleanor sat at the head of the outdoor teak table, her posture rigid with satisfaction as she watched Scarlett record a live tour of the lavish setup for her social media followers. "Look at this, Scarlett," Eleanor said, smoothing down her designer silk kaftan. "This is what a real family looks like. No drab, middle-class accountants bringing down the visual aesthetic of our home. With the Vance family's capital merging with our name, the Radcliffe heritage will finally be undisputed." Devon stepped out onto the terrace, wearing a fresh linen suit and looking exceptionally pleased with himself. He checked his heavy gold watch, smiling as he saw Genevieve's luxury sedan pull into the long, winding driveway. Genevieve just arrived. "Mother, make sure the staff serves the imported French truffles immediately. I want her to see that we don't compromise on luxury." "Of course, darling," Eleanor beamed. "We are Radcliffes. We do not do cheap." As Genevieve walked onto the terrace, draped in designer sunglasses and a white couture dress, Devon rushed forward to kiss her cheek, ushering her to the seat of honor. The waiters immediately began pouring expensive champagne, and the classical duet began to play a soft, elegant melody. "This is absolutely stunning, Devon," Genevieve cooed, looking around the sprawling estate. "My father was slightly hesitant about our merger, but seeing the sheer scale of your family's estate, I can see the Radcliffe name is as wealthy as advertised." "Only the best for my future wife," Devon boasted, raising his glass, "to the future of the Vance Radcliffe alliance." But just as the crystal glasses clinked, the serene atmosphere was violently shattered by the loud, grating rumble of a heavy-duty flatbed tow truck roaring up the paved driveway. The screech of air brakes echoed across the quiet manicured lawns, instantly drowning out the classical violins. Devon's smile froze. Eleanor's face tightened in immediate outrage. "What on earth is that atrocious noise?" Eleanor hissed, standing up from her chair. "Devon, go tell those low-class workers to take their commercial vehicle away from our private gates immediately." Before Devon could step off the terrace, two men in high-visibility vests walked past the security cameras and straight onto the private lawn, carrying heavy steel chains and clipboard documents. Behind them, another flatbed truck pulled up, positioning itself directly behind Devon's leased European sports car. "Excuse me," Devon yelled, his voice cracking with sudden authority as he marched down the stone steps. "What do you think you are doing? This is private property." "I am Devon Radcliffe." The lead repossession agent didn't look up from his clipboard. "Devon Radcliffe. We're here on behalf of Piedmont Luxury Automotive Finance. We have an immediate order to repossess the sports car and the luxury SUV in the driveway due to a sudden, material default on the lease guarantees." "Default? That's impossible," Devon stammered, his face turning a deep, angry red as he saw Genevieve watching from the terrace. "The monthly payments are automatically drafted. My family has a prestigious relationship with your financing bank." "Not anymore, sir," the agent said coldly, gesturing to his partner to hook the heavy steel chains to the front axle of Devon's sports car. The primary financial guarantee on both vehicles was officially revoked at midnight. Without the backing of the guarantor's verified trust assets, your personal credit score does not meet the minimum requirements to hold these leases. The bank has accelerated the default. "We are taking the cars." "Guarantor?" Eleanor gasped, running down the steps, her emerald rings shaking as she pointed a finger at the agents. "We are the Radcliffes. We do not need guarantors. My son is a successful corporate executive." "The guarantor on file wasn't you, lady," the agent said, finally looking up with a dry, pitying smirk. "According to the master contract, both vehicles, the estate's commercial landscaping accounts, and even the private security gates were fully guaranteed by a private trust belonging to a Ms. Giselle Beaumont. She pulled her signature 12 hours ago. You have 30 seconds to clear your personal items from the glove box." A dead, suffocating silence fell over the terrace. On the porch, Genevieve slowly lowered her champagne glass, her eyes narrowing in sharp, sudden calculation as she looked at the heavy steel chains wrapping around Devon's pristine vehicle. While Devon's luxury sports car was being hoisted onto the flatbed, tow truck in full view of his wealthy, new pregnant girlfriend, Giselle Beaumont sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 16th floor of the Beaumont Financial Tower in downtown Charlotte. The room was cool, minimalist, and quiet, illuminated by the steady blue glow of 3 ultra-wide monitors displaying real-time credit markets and risk profiles. Outside her window, the North Carolina skyline stretched out under a clear morning sky, a stark contrast to the manufactured luxury of the Radcliffe estate. Giselle's fingers moved across her slim laptop keyboard with unhurried precision. On her left monitor, a live digital stream showed the public social media profile of Scarlett Radcliffe. Scarlett had just posted a frantic, shaky video from the terrace of the estate, the background clearly capturing the loud, mechanical rumble of the repossession trucks before the feed abruptly cut to black. On her right monitor, a completely different narrative was unfolding. It was the master administrative dashboard for the Beaumont Private Trust. A flashing crimson notification indicated that the 72-hour grace period embedded within the Radcliffe family's primary credit guarantees had officially hit zero. Devon's high-priced corporate attorneys had completely ignored the formal, automated warning notice sent to their registered agent at dawn, likely dismissing it as a weak, post-divorce bluff from an emotional ex-wife. They had severely miscalculated. Giselle didn't need to fight Devon in an ugly, multi-year divorce court to strip him of his wealth. She didn't need to leak family secrets to the tabloids. She owned the very financial foundation of his lifestyle. "You really should have audited the guarantee contracts, Devon," Giselle murmured into the quiet room, her expression completely serene. When Giselle originally structured the personal debt guarantee covenants for the Radcliffe family 3 years ago, she didn't just sign a standard real estate contract, she built a financial fortress. She knew the Radcliffe family's defining flaw was their blinding, narcissistic arrogance. They took credit for every grand asset, but understood nothing about the underlying debt structures that supported them. Because of this, she had quietly embedded an absolute executive retention clause into the credit agreements. The moment Devon signed the divorce papers and officially terminated her association with the family, he automatically triggered a material breach of the financial covenants, rendering their entire multi-million-dollar line of credit instantly void. Giselle moved her mouse cursor over to a prominent, glowing command icon on her dashboard labeled, "Enforce trust sovereignty and revoke financial guarantees." She did not hesitate, she pressed the button. Instantly, the scrolling lines of blue data on her screen ceased, replaced by a cold, clinical string of text that blinked in a slow, rhythmic pattern: guarantee status, revoked, debt default, accelerated, federal asset repossession, transmitted to creditors. Giselle leaned back in her ergonomic chair, picking up her cup of warm black tea. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her gaze fixed entirely on the live video feed of the estate on her left monitor. The structural floor had been pulled out silently from a quiet office in Charlotte, and the devastating ripple effect was traveling straight across the state at the speed of light, headed directly for the grand dining table in the North Carolina hills. Inside the private VIP tent at the Charlotte Capitol Club, Devon stood at the head of the polished glass signing table, his heavy gold fountain pen hovering exactly an inch above the multi-million-dollar funding agreement. He looked directly at the chief executive of the Regional Development Syndicate, flashing his most charismatic, media-trained smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, when you invest in the Radcliffe Development Fund, you aren't just funding brick and mortar, you are funding a global paradigm shift in luxury. This North Carolina estate and our contiguous holdings are the absolute crown jewels of our dynasty." The international board members and retail banking executives nodded in deep admiration, their own pens ready to sign the counterpart documents. Lady Eleanor stood near the silk-draped entrance, her heavy diamond rings clicking softly against her crystal glass as she sipped champagne, her face radiating the smug victory of a queen mother who had successfully purged a commoner from her kingdom. She cued the massive interactive video wall behind the stage to transition from the 3D renderings to a live, high-definition security and operational feed of their flagship Radcliffe estate, wanting the investors to see the active, bustling luxury layout in real time. "And now," Devon announced, his voice booming with absolute authority, "let's look at the actual physical foundation of your investment. Mother, initialize the live master site stream." Lady Eleanor pressed the button on her remote. She expected the massive screen to instantly illuminate with wealthy guests lounging by the marble pools and elite vehicles pulling into the grand courtyard, demonstrating the flawless, rapid operational velocity of the Radcliffe brand. The screen blackout. Instead, the live feed froze. The digital interface flickered violently once, twice, and then vanished into a pitch-black screen. A sudden, piercing error tone echoed through the high-end surround sound system of the pavilion. The sleek corporate presentation graphics disappeared, replaced by a cold, clinical string of bright red text that began to blink in a slow, terrifying rhythm. Critical operational error. Access denied. Trespass was warning issued. Property recovery prohibited by Land Trust Ari. A sharp, confused murmur instantly rippled through the panel of international banking executives. The warm smiles on the faces of the European investors vanished, replaced by narrowed eyes and immediate, defensive posture. Devon's breath caught sharply in his throat. His finger mashed the remote control repeatedly, but the black display remained stubbornly locked. Just a minor satellite synchronization delay with our local servers. Devon stammered into the room, a forced, hollow laugh escaping his lips as a sudden wave of cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Give our technical team 10 seconds to verify the pipeline. He stepped away from the table, his face turning a deep, angry red as he frantically gestured to his chief financial officer, who had just burst through the double doors of the tent. The CFO's face was completely pale, his hands shaking as he held a printed legal notice. Don grabbed him by the arm, his voice a furious whisper. What the hell is going on with the Radcliffe stream? The Vance board is sitting right inside that room. Devon, it's an absolute catastrophe, the CFO whispered frantically, his voice cracking under immense panic. The satellite didn't glitch. Our servers are perfectly fine, but our entire flagship estate has just been locked down by county marshals. Every single entrance is being chained, guests are being evacuated, and our staff is being escorted off the property for criminal trespass. That's impossible, Lady Eleanor hissed, stepping into the shadow of the tent, her frozen smile finally shattering into an expression of pure rage. The Radcliffe Group spent millions of dollars of construction capital building that estate. Nobody has the authority to evict my business. They didn't need an eviction notice from a standard court. The CFO groaned, trembling as he pulled up the property deed on his tablet. The land registry just released an automated enforcement order. Eleanor, the Radcliffe Group doesn't own that soil. The underlying commercial acreage is held entirely by a private entity called the Beaumont Private Trust. Our access was tied to a provisional co-signing covenant. The moment we terminated Giselle yesterday afternoon, we legally triggered an immediate lease expiration. We are trespassing on her family's trust land. Devon stared at the tablet screen, his mind spinning into absolute chaos as the name registered with devastating clarity. Beaumont Private Trust. Giselle. Before he could even breathe, a sudden chime echoed from his phone. A text message from an unverified, encrypted number flashed on the glass screen. Enjoy your luxury blueprints, Devon. It's the last time you'll ever sell a horizon that doesn't belong to you. See you in the restructuring room tomorrow morning. Devon's hand lost all its strength, the phone slipping from his fingers and clattering loudly against the carpeted stage. He looked through the glass doors of the VIP tent, where the international investors were already standing up, their executive assistants frantically packing away their leather folders as news of the federal and county shutdown began to trend across the financial tickers. Lady Eleanor was clutching her heavy rings, her face twisted in absolute horror. The brilliant multi-million-dollar empire they had stolen from a quiet manager was disintegrating in real time, and Devon was standing completely exposed in the middle of the wreckage. The emergency hearing room at the Federal Maritime and Land Administration office in Charlotte was suffocatingly cold. Outside, the midday sun beat down on the glistening glass skyscrapers of the financial district, but inside, the atmosphere as stark and unyielding as a winter storm. Devon Radcliffe sat on the left side of the long glass table, flanked by his mother, Lady Eleanor Radcliffe, and their senior real estate litigator. Devon looked completely unrecognizable from the confident developer who had stood beneath the flashing media lights just 24 hours prior. His tailored linen suit was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and his bloodshot eyes stared blankly at the tabletop. Following the catastrophic flagship estate shutdown, the Radcliffe Group's stock had plummeted by 45% in morning trading. The Vance Development Syndicate hadn't just paused the investment. They had filed a massive multi-million-dollar fraud claim to recover their initial escrow deposits. Yet, despite the smoke rising from her destroyed dynasty, Lady Eleanor forced a desperate, haughty glare onto her face as the heavy glass doors at the back of the room swung open. Giselle Beaumont walked in. She wore an immaculate, deep charcoal-tailored suit that radiated an unshakable, quiet authority. Her dark hair was styled into a sharp, professional bob, and her expression was entirely calm, completely devoid of the domestic exhaustion that had defined her for 3 years. Behind her walked Marcus Alistair, carrying a slim leather folder containing the original master deed restrictions and trust covenants. Devon's lawyer looked up from his notes, clearing his throat nervously. "Your Honor, before we begin, we must recognize that the Radcliffe Group has spent over $3 million in structural improvements on this site. This is a private, marital asset dispute that should not disrupt a critical commercial development engine." "This is not a marital asset dispute," Marcus Alistair said smoothly, taking a seat next to Giselle and opening his folder with precise, measured movements. "We are here today to finalize the absolute asset repossession and enforce the terms of the land lease termination. The contract speaks for itself." Lady Eleanor let out a sharp, bitter laugh, leaning forward over the table. She desperately needed to reclaim her sense of control. "Let's stop the theatrics, Giselle. I don't know what kind of legal loophole you manipulated with the land registry, but our corporate treasury can buy you out 10 times over. Your standard severance check is right here. Sign the execution decree, accept the cash, and pack your bags permanently. A girl from your background should be grateful for the lifestyle we afforded you." Giselle didn't even glance at the check. She looked directly into Lady Eleanor's eyes, her gaze entirely cold. "The papers are already signed, Eleanor. I signed them on your mahogany table yesterday evening. Today is simply about enforcing the exact terms that you and your son insisted upon." The presiding referee entered the room, calling the session to order with a sharp tap of his gavel. Before this panel signs off on any emergency operational stays, the law requires the Lessor's Counsel to read aloud the finalized property covenants, specifically taking into account the verified ownership of the underlying commercial acreage. The Radcliffe Group's lawyer pulled the master document package toward him. He adjusted his glasses, completely confident that the prenuptial agreement he had reviewed years ago would protect the family wealth and leave Giselle with nothing. He flipped to the addendum pages, his mouth opening to speak. "Your Honor, according to the standard corporate lease executed by both parties, all concrete foundations, luxury structures, and utility grids installed under the name Radcliffe Group remain strictly." Suddenly, the words caught violently in his throat. The lawyer's eyes widened behind his lenses, scanning the fine print of the land trust registration attached to the file. The color drained from his face so quickly it looked as if he had stopped breathing. His hands began to tremble, the thick parchment paper rattling loudly against the surface of the glass table. "Richard?" Lady Eleanor frowned, her sharp voice cutting through the room with intense impatience. "What is wrong with you? Read the clause. Remind her that she leaves with nothing." I can't," the lawyer whispered, a bead of cold sweat dripping down his temple. "Read it, counselor," the referee commanded, his voice echoing authoritatively in the silent room. The lawyer swallowed hard, his voice cracking under the weight of the text. Appendix G, Section 5. In the event of an executive-secutive separation or dissolution of marriage initiated by the board against the presiding trust guarantor, Giselle Beaumont, the provisional land and credit lease automatically expires. Furthermore, he stopped, looking up at Devon with pure horror. "Keep reading," Devon shouted, slamming his hand onto the table, an icy wave of panic violently seizing his chest. Furthermore, since the underlying concrete foundations, estate walls, and $3 million of structural infrastructure were installed under a conditional lease, the termination of said lease triggers an immediate default. 100% of the physical improvements, buildings, and residential assets are hereby forfeited immediately to the landowner, the Beaumont Private Trust. To satisfy the outstanding trespass liability, the tenant walks away with zero equity in the physical site. The room erupted into absolute chaos. "No, that's a lie. She's a nobody. She was just a boring tax clerk country girl," Lady Eleanor screamed, lunging across the glass table toward her former daughter-in-law, her face contorted in rage, only for two county marshals to instantly step forward and pin her firmly back into her chair. Devon's hand flew to his throat, his face twisting in silent, paralyzed shock as he stared at the woman he had dismissed as a plain servant. Giselle slowly stood up from her chair, looking down at the panicked, broken family who had tried to discard her in the dark. "You told me to remember my place, Eleanor," Giselle said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute victory that silenced the room. "You should have checked who actually owned the soil beneath your feet before you decided to call me a worthless nobody." The fallout from the land registry hearing room was instantaneous and unmerciful. By 2:00 p.m. that afternoon, the news had completely shattered the regional real estate and luxury development sectors. Wall Street financial blogs, Southern Heritage lifestyle outlets, and digital ticker boards across Charlotte flashed the exact same breaking headline: "The Radcliffe Empire collapses, flagship estate seized as ousted wife reclaims absolute land sovereignty." Devon stood in the grand, high-ceilinged lobby of the Radcliffe Group's corporate headquarters, staring blankly at two armed security guards who blocked his path to the private executive elevators. In his hands, he held a flimsy cardboard box filled with his personal desk items, a silver desk clock, a few framed photos of his golf outings, and a stack of revoked corporate credentials. His executive security badge had been cleanly snapped in half at the front reception desk. "You can't do this," Devon yelled, his voice cracking with desperation as he glared at the building supervisor. "I am the CEO. I am Devon Radcliffe. My family built this brand from the ground up. This is my estate." "Not anymore, Mr. Radcliffe," the supervisor replied coldly, his tone entirely devoid of the sycophantic warmth Devon had grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. "We received an official corporate directive from the Beaumont Private Trust on behalf of the new majority structural asset owner. Your access to the design suites The internal databases and the operational portfolios has been permanently terminated. You have 24 hours to vacate the corporate-owned penthouse as well, as it is a luxury asset cross-collateralized under the flagship property's umbrella. Before Devon could process the massive blow, his phone vibrated violently in his pocket. It was the lead managing director from the Vance Development Syndicate calling from their downtown office. Devon answered frantically, pressing the phone to his ear with a shaking hand. "Hello? Hello, listen to me, the lawyers are sorting out the land lease anomaly right now." "Save your breath, Devon," the director's voice cut through the line, cold, transactional, and absolute. "The investment deal is officially dead. Our compliance team just finished reviewing the audited title filings from the Land Administration Court. The Vance Syndicate will not allow its capital, its reputation, or its brand to be associated with a family that has been legally exposed for multi-million-dollar developer misrepresentation and stripped of their own flagship soil overnight." "What about the development expansion?" Devon stammered, looking around the bustling lobby as corporate workers began to whisper and point at him from the glass mezzanine. "My mother knows that we are the face of this. Lady Eleanor Radcliffe is currently finalizing her calendar to settle the outstanding media debts with our advertising agencies." The director interrupted ruthlessly. "Don't contact our board again. You're a structural liability, Devon, and in this industry, we liquidate liabilities." The line went dead with a sharp, definitive click. Devon slowly lowered the phone, his hands shaking so violently that a heavy glass architectural award slid out of his cardboard box and shattered against the polished marble floor. At the exact same moment, a notification popped up on his screen from his private bank. "Account status alert. Primary personal and business credit lines frozen due to ongoing institutional asset repossession and default acceleration." Every single domino he and Eleanor had meticulously set up the multi-million-dollar valuation, the elite international connections, the absolute high society standing had fallen in a matter of hours. The very legal and financial systems they had used to crush Giselle had turned their massive, cold gears and crushed him instead. He was no longer a real estate titan looking down on the world. He was just a man standing in a lobby, holding a box of paper trash, with the afternoon traffic rushing past outside the glass doors. The wind outside the flagship estate was relentless, sweeping across the manicured lawns of the grand entrance and carrying with it a harsh chill that signaled the end of an era. On the wet concrete sidewalk, a scene was unfolding that drew the immediate, hushed stares of departing movers, high society neighbors, and passing onlookers. Lady Eleanor Radcliffe stood huddled near the driveway, her expensive mink coat offering absolutely no protection against her internal panic. Her face, usually a mask of aristocratic perfection and unyielding snobbery, was flushed with a mixture of rage and deep, raw humiliation. When the heavy front doors opened and Giselle Beaumont stepped out, flanked by Marcus Alastair and her newly appointed security detail, Eleanor rushed forward, completely abandoning every shred of the upper-class dignity she had spent a lifetime cultivating. "Giselle, please stop," Eleanor cried out, her voice cracking as she reached out a gloved hand, only to be politely but firmly blocked by Giselle's lead security guard. "You have to listen to me. This has gone too far. Devon is completely ruined. They are repossessing our private assets. His name is permanently blacklisted across the entire venture capital network, and the creditors are calling in every single corporate loan. You were a part of this family once. You can't do this to him. You can't do this to our family." Giselle stopped. She turned slowly, her expression completely unreadable behind her dark designer sunglasses. She looked down at Eleanor, whose eyes were wide with desperation. tears threatening to ruin her meticulously applied makeup. "Your family, Eleanor?" Giselle asked, her voice calm, slicing through the air like a razor. "A day ago, you sat across from me at the table and told me I looked like a drab, middle-class tax clerk. You stood by and cheered while your son tried to throw me out of our own home. With nothing but a cheap canvas bag and 3 years of grueling financial labor, you dismissed as low-level service. Where was your sense of family then?" "We were wrong," Eleanor pleaded, her hands trembling violently as she looked past Giselle toward Marcus Alastair, hoping for a shred of legal leniency or pity. "We didn't know. We didn't understand your true capacity. If you just drop the immediate land lease forfeiture clause, we can settle this quietly. We can fix this, Giselle. We can restructure the group's equity." "You still don't get it," Giselle said softly, stepping closer so only Eleanor could hear her next words over the hum of the idling vehicles. "You're not sorry you treated me like a servant, Eleanor. You're just sorry you got caught. You only value me now because you finally know what my trust is worth on a corporate balance sheet. That isn't respect, that's just survival." From behind them, Devon approached the curb, his cardboard box of personal belongings tucked awkwardly under his arm. He looked completely hollowed out, his posture slouched, staring helplessly at the woman he had completely underestimated for 3 long years. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to offer an apology he had never intended to give until his entire stolen empire crumbled into absolute dust. But Giselle didn't give him the chance. She didn't look back at him. She looked down at the driveway, where her personal vehicle sat idling near the rear bumper of a waiting, midnight black town car. Her assistant stepped forward, opening the passenger door for her. "Keep the canvas bag, Devon," Giselle said, turning her back on them as she prepared to step inside the warm luxury of the car. "Consider it my relocation allowance for you and your mother. You have 24 hours to leave my land." Giselle stepped into the vehicle. The door closed with a solid, heavy thud, sealing out the noise and the panic of the crumbling dynasty. As the town car pulled away from the curb and merged into the afternoon traffic, Devon, Lady Eleanor, and Scarlett were left standing on the freezing pavement, completely ignored by the elite world they once thought they ruled, left with nothing